There is evidence to suggest that the Babylonians and Egyptians began measuring time at least 5,000 years ago. The Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans developed the sundial to keep track of time throughout the day and water clocks to keep time during the night. However, these methods were very weather dependent and not suitable for cloudy regions or areas prone to freezing. In the 13th century, driven by the increasing need for dependable timekeeping, the weight-driven mechanical clock was invented. The earliest recorded installation of this type of clock occurred in 1283 at Dunstable Priory in Bedfordshire, England. The Roman Catholic Church played a significant role in its development to support strict observance of prayer times. Cathedrals and churches in France and Italy were outfitted with clocks that would ring the bells to signify the time. The name, as we know it today, actually derives from the Latin word cloca, or bell. A key innovation that made this type of clock possible was the verge escapement, the origins of which are unknown. A clock escapement is the timekeeping element that keeps the inner workings of the clock moving, advancing its hands. Although a radical innovation compared to the sundial or water clocks, the mechanical clock was still very inaccurate and unreliable. Some estimate that the verge escapement reported timekeeping within a half hour per day. In the 15th century, clocks were starting to be used for domestic use, albeit still very much a luxury afforded to the wealthy. A key innovation at this time was how clocks were powered, replacing the use of a weight with that of a spring, referred to as a fusee movement. This enabled the creation of the portable clock. The 16th century saw the creation of the pendulum clock devised by Dutch astronomer and mathematician Christian Huygens on Christmas Day in 1656. Accuracy was significantly improved to the point where it could be used more reliably for scientific purposes such as mapping the skies. In 1675, Huygens continued to build on his innovation, developing the spiral balance spring that reported timekeeping within a minute a day. Around the same time, there was an important incremental innovation discovered by an English watchmaker, the anchor escapement. This design is most often observed in the grandfather clock and keeps time within a few seconds a week. After this, Thomas Tompion and George Graham would develop the deadbeat escapement, which would lead precision timekeeping for 150 years. A good example of design thinking would come during the First World War. Prior to this time, men carried pocket watches, with wristwatches predominantly worn by women. However, out of necessity, men too started strapping their pocket watches to their wrist, so it was more readily accessible during battle.
World War I catapulted wristwatches into the mainstream as the technological innovation of their time. However, their inner workings remained the mechanical devices that were standard to the industry. Switzerland had a monopoly over production of mechanical watches, accounting for 95% of global market share due to their established and highly skilled labor force. This all changed on Christmas Day, 1969. Japanese watchmaker Seiko launched their Astron analog wristwatch, the first wristwatch powered by quartz crystals. Quartz clocks had been used by the scientific community since the late 1920s. However, this was the first time quartz powered a wearable device made for consumers. The technology capitalized on quartz's piezoelectric properties, converting oscillations into electric pulses spaced 1 second apart. These pulses powered a motor which moved the watch gears advancing the hands. This technological innovation disrupted the industry as the Astron was accurate to within 5 seconds per month, whereas the best mechanical devices were accurate to 1 to 2 seconds per day. Three years later, the true power of quartz began to take hold with the introduction of the first digital watch, the Pulsar. This watch used a push button to light up an LED screen to display the time and had no moving parts at all. The digital craze began, and the Pulsar was even featured in the 1973 James Bond film Live and Let Die. LED screens did not last long as they put too much strain on battery life and were shortly replaced with liquid crystal display screens. Seiko continued to advance quartz technology both in its digital line and in its analog line, keeping them competitive in both markets. By 1977, Seiko had market dominance in the watch industry, and because the Swiss companies were unwilling to embrace this technology, Switzerland suffered its worst economic crisis ever. The quartz crisis saw the industry shrink by 2/3 and over 62,000 people lost their jobs. After substantial government bailouts and a revamp of the industry, Swiss watchmakers began using quartz in their watches. The launch of the low-cost, fashion-forward Swatch brand in 1983 brought the Swiss watch industry back from the brink of extinction. In addition, mechanical watches were making a comeback. The 1990s saw a resurgence of mechanically powered devices, this time marketed as luxury items, with some selling for over $100,000. Stemming from the digital revolution, Seiko continued to push the boundaries of the watch industry with the introduction of the TV watch in 1982. It was a quartz-based technology that ran 82 different channels and FM radio off of 2 AA batteries, and again made its silver screen debut in a James Bond film. The watch was cumbersome, but the technological leap forward was the liquid crystal video display screen. Pager watches came to market in 1994, and in 1998, Seiko launched the first wearable computer, the Reputer Pro. The true innovator that has made the smartwatch a success is Apple, which launched the first Apple Watch in 2015. Apple's innovative organizational culture was able to transform the complicated smartwatches of the past into a simple, intuitive, consumer-friendly device with broad appeal and functionality that stretches well beyond timekeeping. Paired with their strong market presence in the smartphone industry, Apple has created new competition within the mid-range watch segment. Android has now introduced Android Wear in order to compete in this sphere and to stretch their reach into luxury watch brands such as Frédéric Constant. So, which innovations are on the horizon in the watch industry? There are 3 distinct markets for watches: luxury items powered by traditional mechanical devices, quartz timepieces at a variety of price points, and mid-range smart devices. Company leaders will need to determine the 4 Ps of their organization to better understand how their products, process, position, and paradigm match to that of their competitors. This will help inform how they can spot opportunities for innovation and capture value within this diverse industry. Only time will tell what comes next.